All right. Hey, everybody, we got a couple more minutes, so just hang tight. If anybody wants to go ahead and go in the comments and share any cool books you're reading lately, podcasts you're interested in, whatever it is, we'd love to hear from you. All right, hello friends. We've got a lot of you guys popping in today. Thanks for joining. We're gonna give it just a couple more minutes until we start. We'll start right at noon, so make sure we get you in and out on time. But like I said, if anybody wants to pop in some of the things you're listening to, what you're interested in. Right now, I'm trying to get my camera set up. I have a new office arrangement and I'm still kind of figuring out the best places for everything and how to set everything up. So that's why you're seeing a bunch of blank walls behind me. All right. Okay, so someone just popped in wanting to know what I'm listening to, what podcasts or what books I'm reading right now. I'm gonna be honest, I'm kind of taking a break from books for a minute, like actual reading of the physical books. Just trying to deal with kind of a little bit of overwhelm on my own end in my own life. But I've done some cool audiobooks, but I've actually gotten a little bit more into the podcast lately, and there's a new one that just launched by one of my favorite authors, Martha Beck. It's called Bewilderment. So it looks like bewilderment, but it's they pronounce it Bewilderment. And it's really just a cool kind of broad ranging set of topics regarding, personal development, how we deal with stress, creativity and self-doubt. There was a really cool one on that the other day. Someone had written in and submitted a question about their own kind of inner critic versus how do you manage that versus when it's actual critique or criticism to make something better. And so this really cool discussion about the difference between those and not letting your inner critic so far overrule what's like valuable criticism that it all kind of gets mushed and jumbled together. So that one was kind of fun. Still got lots of folks joining. Don't worry, we haven't started yet. We've still got a minute on our official Nicole's cell phone time frame. So we'll go ahead and jump on in when that one's ready. So yeah, throughout it, we have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end based on the topic. So be thinking of questions. You can submit them throughout the webinar. I'll try and see them as we kind of go. And then if I can jump on it, I'll grab one during. And if not, we'll pop into them right at the very end. So I hope everyone is joining us and feeling good today. I put on my spring jacket. It's a nice 75-degree day here in Arizona, so I can't complain too much. I don't think anybody would take me seriously if I did. So that's where we're heading from today. Okay, it is noon on the dot. I want to go ahead and get us started. And we are talking today on the March 4th, 2020 topic, Tame the Tension, Tame the Tension. So that's what we're going to be doing, even though my arrow is conveniently located on the wrong bullet. Just want to point out the next one will be April 21st. So if you want to go ahead and join us for that one as well, I'd love to chat with you then also. So okay, as usual, we are partnered with the League of Women in Government, an amazing national organization working on diversity and inclusion, building up more women leaders in local government. So check them out if you're not familiar with them. Their address is up on the screen. They've got a lot of really great resources and connections for you. All right, if you haven't met me yet, it's nice to meet you. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces, but maybe a couple of new ones in there too. I'm Nicole Lance, I'm the CEO of Lance Strategies. I'm also one of the managing partners for a company called Extraordinary Balance, and that's a joint venture I have with a colleague of mine, Eric Bailey. I'm based here in Phoenix. I'm one of the co-founders of Arizona Women Leading Government, an organization that we started really to intentionally work on the issue of growing more women leaders in local government. So my background is almost exclusively in local government. I do have some nonprofit sector experience as well, but this is kind of how I ended up here on your screens today. My family, that's my husband, Sean, with the amazing facial hair, which we have since decided was better left for winter. As we move into spring, I'm able to see a little bit more of his face now. And it's my little one, Emerson, and then my stepdaughter, Micah, over there, who's out on her first deployment. So a little bit about me. Today, and the general format for these webinars, we do content and Q&A. So we'll start with just some overviews, some stuff I want to share with you. And then, like I said, go ahead and in the GoToWebinar kind of box on the side of your screen, you can go ahead and enter any questions that you might have. All right, we are going to talk about fear. And fear, as we mentioned in our last webinar, is something that restrains, constrains, or derails us. Restrains, constrains, or derails us. And it shows up in different ways. And one of the ways that it shows up is this idea of tension. And tension then becomes a distraction. It becomes something that makes us behave in a way that we maybe wouldn't want to on our best day. It's something that adds an extra layer of complexity, one more thing to deal with on top of everything else, and can really be problematic when we're trying to really continue to move forward. So before we start, I want to check in with you, and I want you to check in with yourselves, because when we talk about taming tension, one of the most important things that we need to understand is that we need to build our awareness of it first. For a long time in my life, I was really, really good at pretending I wasn't tense, I wasn't anxious, I wasn't stressed, I was fine. I think I was the finest person I'd ever met before, if you asked me how I was doing. And in reality, that's just not what was going on. And it got me into trouble sometimes, not having that kind of not having that awareness of where I was really at. So think of right now, and this doesn't have to be a long diatribe, but how are you feeling? Could you put a name to it right now? Because I'll be honest with you. If you're on my mailing list and you saw the message that I sent out in February, I think it was just last week, about what occurred in my personal life over the month, February was really awful. And I'll be honest with you, March isn't shaping up right now to be a ton better. I'm hopeful for it to go that way, but right now it's really challenging. And so if I had to put a name on how I'm feeling today, I'm feeling a little anxious. I'm feeling a little tired. I mean, I think, physically, but just really open at the end of it, with all of that going on. So kind of just a lot going on. I referred to my head as feeling soupy last night, was the best way I could describe it, of just all this stuff in there kind of floating around. So think through how you're feeling. Number one, physically. We hold tension in our bodies. It exists in our mind, like it comes from these other places, but it will manifest in us physically. So kind of just do that body scan. Is your jaw tight? Is your forehead tense? How does your neck feel? Are you moving freely? Are you a little tight? Do you have tight shoulders? Are you kind of sitting up? Going through, is there tightness in your hips? Are you at ease the way that you're sitting? Just take inventory of that simply to build awareness of how you're feeling. Number two, how are you doing mentally? I mentioned like my brain soup going on. It's a little soupy right now. Doesn't mean I have to live in that reality. Doesn't mean I have to cancel everything I have planned, but just means that, like, okay, maybe I'm not operating at 100% of how I normally like to be. And then emotionally, how are you doing? And for a lot of you who are and tend to be, at least within my audience, high performers, high producers, high reliance people, other people come to you for help. A lot of times we don't stop to ask ourselves this question, and we rarely have other people stop to ask us that question either. So check in with that, kind of build some awareness around that, how you're doing emotionally as well. Okay. For this webinar, can you be radically present? This is my challenge to you. Could you sit here through the webinar and just focus on this. One of the ways we tame tension is by focusing our attention into what we're doing. And so for this time, if you are my multitaskers, unless it's eating lunch or maybe drinking coffee or something like that, could you, for the sake of this next 20 some odd minutes, just sit with this and be really present here with where we're at. Okay, today we're going to go through some micro strategies to help tame the tension. These are actual practices that you can utilize or leverage in your own life, in your work life, maybe even at home, to help you tame the tension when it pops up. Okay, physical, mental, and structural. These are the three categories that we're going to tackle in terms of what I mean to give you some tools for taming the tension. So in these three areas, physical is pretty obvious. Mental is sort of what's going on between our own two ears. And then by structural, I mean in your life overall, what are some things that you can do a little bit differently to help reduce some of that tension and get it tamed into something manageable for you. Because that tension, a lot of times, is not only symptomatic of fear, but that tension can actually create it as well. So that's where your awareness is really important. Okay, let's get physical, as Olivia Newton-John used to say. Number one, and this seems easy, and often what I find is that when I work with individuals experiencing tension, they have the tools in their tool belt wrapped around their waist and they're choosing not to use them. So number one is this idea of actually getting physical. So how are you moving throughout the day? How are you moving throughout the week in a physical sense from your body, regardless of your physical capabilities? One awesome way to tame tension and help reset the blood flow in your body and get it to where you need to go is to stretch. Take a minute to stretch. The actual word for this is called pandiculation, and I did this in an earlier webinar. It's the act of yawning and stretching at the same time actually releases dopamine in your body. So it's actually going to give you a little shot of something that's going to feel good. So if you're watching this right now, just go ahead and put a couple arms in the air and stretch it out a little bit. Another flip side of this is to think in micro bursts. So when I say things like get physical, for a lot of my, again, overachievers, which tends to be a lot of you that are watching this, we think, I need to hire a personal trainer, I need a whole new workout outfit regime, I need to go to the gym 6 days a week and change my life and do 2 hours that, or it's not worth anything. And I call BS on that. Try it in little micro bursts, do a couple stretches here, limber up a little bit, loosen up, change your physical position in your chair, maybe take a walk around the office, do something small. These are tactics you have heard before, but a lot of you stop implementing them. So start there, something minor. Next one is actually an acupressure technique. You have a yin-tang point, or that translates as the hall of impressions. So it's actually located in between your eyebrows, just above kind of the center of where the edges of your eyebrows sort of slope down together. So right here, and there's a couple things you can do, but just take your forefinger or your thumb. Some people like to use 2 fingers and just rub that pressure point in a circle. Just rub it around, counterclockwise, clockwise, whatever feels good to you. Do that for about a minute and really become mindful of the fact that you're doing it. So focus on that finger touching that acupressure point. What that's going to do is it's actually going to physically lower the stress in your body. It also provides, as you know, I always say a little structure goes a long way. A little bit of structure for a quick mindfulness practice, which is how am I paying attention to my finger actually moving on my body in between my own 2 eyebrows. So that's a quick, easy technique. What's interesting about that is if you have a headache, we tend to rub this area of our forehead anyway, which is sort of a subconscious approach into something that our bodies instinctively know will actually help us release stress. Also really good for releasing a headache if you actually have one. Okay, next one. Some of you have seen this slide before, and this is breathe. Breathe. We have been doing this since we were born. It's integral to our being, but we have 156 neurons in our brain that spy on our breathing. So when our breathing is restricted, labored, or shallow, which tends to happen when we get stressed or we have physical tension that can constrain our lung capacity, or when we have mental tension, stress, anxiety, that causes our breathing to be constricted. And when that happens, our brain registers that and says, uh-oh, we're getting into fight flight. It's actually going to amplify your tension if your breathing is restricted. So really practice those long, deep breaths. See if you can get your exhale to be twice as long as your inhale. Or you can try a couple of specific techniques, do a Google search. There's a number of them out there. My favorite easy one to implement is box breathing. Inhale for a count of 4, hold it at the top for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, and then pause for a count of 4. That's going to lower your heart rate and actually reoxygenate your body. And when you do those two things, it's going to push more blood up into the frontal lobe of your brain, which is where your best cognitive decision making happens. Your highest thinking occurs right there. So you want that to be really well oxygenated and have the blood flow that it needs. Okay, next one I mentioned is, as we were kind of getting people online, one of my favorite authors is Martha Beck, and in that podcast, Bewilderment, which looks like bewilderment, if you search for Martha Beck, bewilderment on whatever platform you use, Martha has this really amazing technique that is super, super powerful, and it's really simple. So from wherever you're seated, looking in front of you, and try to get kind of a broader view of the room or down a hallway, or, you know, like if you're sitting in a coffee shop, the view that you see on the screen in front of you. And what you do is you look around you find one central space in front of you to focus on. So one thing that is kind of like the center of where your eyes are looking. You look at that thing, and then without moving your head, without moving your eyes around, you start to bring your awareness to anything you see in your peripheral vision that is red, white, or yellow. You can substitute other colors, but for the purposes of an example. So looking at that center, and you can even do it with the image on your screen right now. So find a center point in that image and look at it. And then without moving your eyes, slowly broaden your peripheral vision awareness to everything else that you see in the image that is red, white, or yellow. And what that does is it's actually going to reset the left and right sides of your brain so that you can focus on where you're at. And it's gonna center your body and your mind and what's happening with that exercise, rather than with whatever other tension is building up or going on around you. Okay. Let's flip over to some mental techniques, or some mental techniques and strategies. Find a trigger, find your cosmic bat signal that says, oops, okay, we're tense. Here's a little thing that we can do to release some of that tension. This is important, but it's something that you need to kind of think through. So when you find yourself all of a sudden being tense, what is something you can either do or look at or engage in that would help you reset that perspective? So I'm feeling tense, I don't feel good, I feel yucky, my chest is tight, whatever it is. Okay, I need something to help me. Here's my trigger. Some people like to light a candle. I have a really funny video of my daughter on my phone that I'll watch when I feel tense. When I was going through my challenges back last month, one of the things I did was I watched these little mini episodes from the Ellen DeGeneres show called Burning Questions. And they're like a couple-minute videos of her doing the silly game with her guests, and it's really funny. But it was enough of a signal to me to just kind of like reset a little bit. I'm ready for the next thing. All right, next. We talk about, or we hear about, meditation a lot. And meditation for some people is a 4-letter word. Meditation for some people is just a buzzword. It's not something they're into, or it's something that people don't think is attainable. They have this vision of it where, you know, they have to be surrounded by orchids and lotus flowers and candles and, you know, twinkly lights, and that's the only place they can get into. So I like to think of this as micro meditation. Other people who don't resonate with the word meditation, you can think of mindfulness, you could think of prayer. For some of you that works, whatever it is, but it's this spot of peace and calm, and it's a time to just be still. because often tension hides and gets stuck in our busyness and our constant moving. So the more that we're able to get still and allow some of that to just settle, the more likely we are to be able to acknowledge it and then release it. We might find out like I'm tense, but maybe I don't actually need to be. One of the best ways for me to get in kind of microbursts of meditation, because sometimes it's hard for me to turn off the tension in my head, is using apps. So Calm is a really popular one. I like Insight Timer. It's searchable. They're really easy meditations and guided meditations or music that you can find that 1 minute to hours at a time, so whatever kind of works for your schedule, but have something that gets you into a little bit of that still place without feeling like you have to go to some retreat in the woods to do it. All right, key calming phrases. Again, this is a tool that's probably in your tool belt that you're not using. When you start to feel that tension, what are things that you can just say to yourself really quickly to help reset that perspective? I can tame this tension is one. I'm starting to feel, the jaw's getting tight. Okay, I can tame this tension, or I can tackle this tension if you're a more, kind of active person. So find something to say to yourself to give you a little bit of that break and that pause when you're in that situation. I want to talk about journaling as we move out of the mental strategies for taming tension. And I know journaling is another one of those things that, people either have this outdated view that we're reading a diary, or something with a little heart-shaped lock on it and a key that we have to put in it, or something that requires hours and hours and hours of time. I want to offer you a couple of different ways to think about journaling, because this act of putting pen to paper and moving it around, whether you're doodling, you're drawing, you're writing, is actually going to lower the stress in your body. It's going to decrease cortisol, which is the stress-reducing hormone. So something to consider bringing this in as a practice. Doodling is one way to do that. The other way is to actually journal. And in journaling, I would encourage you to do this a couple of ways. If you don't want to do it handwritten, although that is one way to reduce stress, feel free to use a computer. People skip this, and I think it's interesting that, well, it never occurred to me, I could just type it out. If you type faster and that's more relaxing just to get the stuff out of your mind, go ahead and use a computer. Number two, use prompts. There's books you can buy that have prompts in these. You can come up with your own, such as whatever a favorite memory from my childhood was, or the best thing that happened this week is, the thing I'm looking forward to the most in the next 6 months, or, whatever it is. Creative writing, you could get creative writing. If I was any animal, what would I be and why? Whatever it is. But prompts give you, again, enough structure to focus in so that you can just engage in the act rather than worrying about how you are engaging in the act. So it's going to give you just a little bit of freedom in there. Number three, rewrite your story. I love this one. This is really good for processing past engagements or past encounters, past experiences that we've had. Go back and rewrite it. If you wish it would have been different, or you wish you could have had a different outcome, allow yourself the creative expression of exploring that and rewrite the story. Actually, or maybe it's the thing that's causing you to be tense. Rewrite that story around it. Try and see it from a different perspective, or just totally invent one if you need to. It could be your superhero persona coming out. Last one on this, just get creative with it, or last two on this, get creative. So don't be afraid of being creative. Don't be afraid of turning it into a drawing of a word instead of, actually writing. And then finally, consider automatic writing. So automatic writing is a technique that has a number of different applications and structures. But one of the ways I like to do it is I set a timer for myself. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is. I usually do this one on the computer, but I've also explored doing it in handwriting as well. And you just write whatever comes to your head for that period of time until that timer goes off. It could be your grocery list, it could be just a list of words, it could be sentences, it could be a story that you're creating, it could be capturing a memory of something, it could be an actual journal entry, whatever it is. But for that period of time, you just engage in that. And again, it's going to unlock your brain from these tense things that are happening around you and just let you focus on what's in front of you. All right, let's talk structural, and then we've got a couple of questions coming in that we'll tackle. So I found this phrase on a life coach's website a couple weeks ago, and she said, remember, space, grace, and pace. When we think of tension, it's often created by having a lack of space. The schedules are jammed, we're never alone, we don't get that downtime that we need, we don't have the reset time. Grace, meaning we have this constant pressure, whether it's self-imposed or it's coming from other people or multiple other sources, to do better, do more, don't be, be invincible, all these things. And so giving yourself a little bit of grace when you do make a mistake, and then pace. So space, grace, and pace, the pace at which we are moving. Could you slow down in some area? Could you leave work on time? One day this week. I'm not even about getting to work, early or getting to work right when you start, but like, could you leave work on time one day? Could you manage that pace a little bit different? Could you take a look at your work calendar and examine how many meetings you are being asked to attend that maybe you don't really need to? Could you look at that differently too? So space, grace, and pace. Keep calm and make a plan. One of the other problems that creates tension, one of the things I find commonly, is we have these massive to-do lists and we have it all captured and I know this needs to get done, but we don't walk through it and create an actual intentional plan for how and when we are going to create it. So Jen Lawrence, who joined me on one of these webinars a couple of months ago, she talks about scheduling your to-dos. So actually like going through and prioritizing them, but then putting them on your calendar so that that space on your calendar can't get eaten up. These are really critical tasks for managing the tension that's created by managing the pure breadth of what we're responsible for. Okay, next, examine what is causing you tension. Is it valid? Is it valid? There's so many things that have caused me tension, and even now I still bump into, that really aren't rooted in something that should be allowed to cause me tension. They're really not coming from a place that, hey, this is really valid for this to be causing me this much stress or discomfort. And when I get back into it, like, oh, it was really tense because, we have this presentation coming up and I haven't done the slides yet, but I know I have time scheduled on Friday for 2 hours to do the slides. So I have no need to be tense between now and when that actually happens because I know I have the time set aside. So really examining what's making you tense and then asking yourself, is that a valid reason to actually be tense? If it is, then what can I do about it to be less tense? How can I actually manage that and start to deal with it? All right, tap into your tribe. I am guilty of this. This is why it's so important, because I've really been actively working on this for the last 2 months. I am really guilty of when I get stressed or I feel tense or I have a lot on my plate, I retract and I pull into my little shell, and all of a sudden I take 2 or 3 days to respond to text messages. I don't reach out and check on my friends. I cancel the lunch or the coffee meetups that I had scheduled. I don't answer the phone call when a family member is calling to check in, because I don't feel like I have the capacity to give in those areas. And what happens is I retract and I actually cut off resources all around me. And that's a really challenging pattern to get into. So when I feel tense, one of my strategies that I employ actively is to intentionally reach out. The second I start to feel that tension rising, okay, who can I reach out to for a quick call, a quick coffee, or even a lunch get together? Sometimes it's over video call, however you want to do it, but I intentionally make myself do that. And it's not a natural inclination for me. I'm definitely the turtle in the picture, but that has really changed how I move through tense periods in my life. And that's become a real strength and something that I'm really grateful for. All right, last strategy, and I was reminded of this one when I was in the Taco Bell drive-through the other day. So please, no judgment on my Taco Bell habits. I fully embrace it, and I'm also very aware of it. One of the things that happened was I was in the drive-through, I placed my order, and the guy who took my headset or took my order didn't turn off his headset microphone after he took my order, and there was enough cars in front of me that I didn't move very far so I could still hear him over the speaker. So what I hear over the speaker after he takes my order is, okay, thank you, ma'am, it'll be, whatever it is at the window, please pull forward. And then there's like a beat of silence and you hear, woo, hoo-hoo, I nailed that one. I am on a roll. It was like the greatest moment of witnessing someone else's self-affirmation, and it was so honest and authentic. And I haven't forgotten that the last couple of days. That's been really inspiring. So another strategy to think of when you're trying to tame that tension is to search for a way to affirm yourself. One of the ways I like to do this is to think back to when I've tackled other situations like this in the past and know that, you know what, I've done this before and I could do it again. I can conquer this. I already have experience doing this. So leaning into that a little bit. All right, we have a couple minutes for Q&A. So we've got a couple of them coming in. One of them, my source of tension at work is my boss, and that's in all cap letters, my boss. What the heck am I supposed to do about that? Yeah, that's a challenging one. When you really delve into it and you start to realize, hey, the person I'm reporting to is the one that's causing the most tension, makes me tense. How do I handle that? So a couple of ways. One is to evaluate how you are responding to the stimuli your boss is providing. Could you change something about how you're responding or reacting? One of the ways to do this is to reset your expectations, because sometimes what happens is our expectations or our desires for what that interaction looks like might live up here, and then what's actually happening is occurring down here, and that constant realization of that gap is what's hurtful or what causes some of that tension. They did it again. They did it again. Well, if we change our expectations to, we know they're going to do it again, then we're eliminating that gap. It doesn't mean we're accepting that as a great way to operate. It doesn't mean that we enjoy it, but could we reset expectations so that we're not constantly disappointed by that gap being present? The other one to think about is there anything that you could change about how you operate that might alleviate some of that? Is there something you could do differently to alter that tension that's being created? Could you ask for a meeting at a different time? Could you ask for a standing meeting? Could you ask for the elimination of a standing, regular, ongoing meeting and move to a typed or digital source of sharing information back and forth? And then ultimately, if this is a situation that's likely to go on and to be prolonged, you have to consider yourself, is that something you want to keep living with? Or is it time to search for something new? Another way that I've dealt with this in the past is, instead of looking to work to hopefully be a great experience every day, I learned to look outside of work instead, and to really focus my efforts on getting validation and positivity coming from places other than my workplace to shore up some of what was happening there and kind of cover for some of that gap. So, okay, that was the only question that came in. If we have any other ones come up, go ahead and email me. The next webinar will be on 421, which is permission granted, and we're going to talk about giving ourselves permission for different ways to move through fear and the effects that'll have. And then the webinar that I unfortunately had to cancel in February has been rescheduled to May, and that date is up on your screen. So my contact information is here. I would love to connect. I'd love to have an email, a phone call, even just a video call, quick back and forth, get to know you a little bit better. And as always, know that as we end, I applaud you for the work that you are doing, not just in terms of your employment, but in terms of your own personal journey and the work that you're doing there, especially as we move through fear and we start to really take that on instead of letting it be an undercurrent that kind of moves in our lives. That's really bold and courageous work. So thank you for joining me in it. I look forward to chatting with you next month. Thanks.